Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, today we have Dr. Oscar. I will say all his full name very soon, but before that, Oscar, are you prepared to engage?
Yes, I think so. Here I am, charged.
I'm sure you are. So Oscar Garcia-Panella, that's the way to say it in Spanish. There's this weird letter called the ñ. Yes. Which in other languages we don't have them. He's a telecommunications and electronic engineer, and he has enjoyed several stages abroad. So in the US, California, I can see many places here, in the VIS Lab at the Samueli School of Engineering as well, and at ETC. Oscar directs the Videogame School at ENTI-UB in Barcelona, and he partners as a senior gamification consultant at Cookie Box. So Oscar, that was a brief one. Is there anything that we missed from your intro?
Well, thank you very much, Rob, for inviting me to be here and describing everything that well. If I should add something, I would say that we have this online master program on Gamification and Transmedia Storytelling that is happening in IEBS, which is an additional school for entrepreneurs that is like a business school entirely online.
Fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. It's funny because there's some people who have asked me about your program, and they say, no, that's in the school you work in. I said, no, I work at IE. That one is IEBS.
Yeah.
It's two separate schools. They're great, both of them in their own ways. It's a different school. That's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. It can be confusing sometimes.
No, and of course, I mean, at IE there is a business school, so that would be IE Business School, so kind of BS as well. So it's like, which is which?
Yeah.
I've had that episode many times before, so that's great. So Oscar, we would like to get to know you a little bit more, a little bit kind of personal, but not too personal if you don't want to. We want to know, what does a regular day with Oscar look like? Like, I don't know, what do you do in a normal day, in a regular day, or there's no regular day, a regular week? What does it look like to teach in all these video games and gamification places and to have this consultancy in gamification called Cookie Box?
Well, I think that it's super diverse. I mean, there's a lot happening. I don't have 2 weeks that look like the same. So, not even a couple of days. I mean, if I had to say something, for instance, Thursdays are more or less similar right now because I'm basically like teaching in the morning, teaching in the evening, and then something happens in between, which is, of course, different every week. But if I look at the rest of the days, it's clearly different. So, in terms of managing my agenda, I'm very happy that I have some kids and family and everything, because then, I learn a lot of logistics with them, and I can sort of apply it to my professional life because there's a lot happening. I think that I'm fortunate because normally there are, 3, 4, 5 beautiful things that happen, in one of my days. Of course, today, we have this beautiful thing that is happening now, which is that you're interviewing me. Thank you very much for the interest and everything. I think that, sometimes it's online, sometimes it's presential, it's always experiential. And of course, if I'm a Cookie Box, we are like designing solutions there, and everything is quite connected because, you are sort of co-creating solutions with people in the company. You work with real clients, you need indicators, KPIs, you need to make it work. Then you go to the university and you cannot detach for it, which is something good for the students, I guess, because everything that I able to explain there has to be connected with reality. And I think that this is, fresh and important, to have this inside a university class where you can have like some of this applied to stuff, even if, teaching algebra, for instance, which is one of the things that I'm doing now.
I can feel you when you're talking about teaching algebra. It's not exactly a subject that students are excited about, right?
No, not in a video game school, because, and I understand them because, it's real. When they come there, they want to create video games. They are not, interested in algebra.
Or they think they shouldn't be.
Yeah, they think not. So, but I try to change things, during the very first week. We do some tiny hackathons, little game jams, always directing some video game related challenge that connects with, stuff that I know they like and I know they know, like FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer or Uncharted or Tomb Raider or God of War or whatever. And then we look at some gameplay videos. Sometimes we see some, simulations, and then we try to a little bit grab the algebra from there. So once they've seen that there's some algebra there, then I always ask something like, well, do you want to do that thing? Do you want to program the thing when you are, as a developers go to studio? Okay, you better learn some algebra, because if not, you will be so dependent on an engine or a tool or something that, if you are not able to implement by yourself, you won't have the same salary, you won't be, as interesting as you could be. So, okay, let's start with algebra.
Let's get this done.
Yes.
Basically, I say that because I am teaching quantitative methods or managerial decision making to MBAs. So it's exactly the same type of thing. They want to do, they want to do marketing. They want to do finance. They want to do operations. They want to do HR. This thing of, numbers sounds scary and weird. So
yeah, it does. It does.
It's the same type of thing that they still need it for most of those things anyway. So it's exactly the same kind of vibe. So Oscar, now that we know all of the exciting things that you're doing, what does a day be composed of in general on all these things that you're doing? We would like to go onto a story, all right? And this one is, we ask this to all our guests because sometimes when we do these great introductions, because you're doing amazing things, people get to think, these people have it all figured out. It's always been, rainbows and unicorns and everything is fantastic. It always goes absolutely well. And I want to show people that this is not exactly the way things happen. Sometimes things don't go as well as we expect. Either we screw up or things didn't go out the way we expected, and we have some fail or some first attempt in learning. And we want to know of a story of a time that this happened to you, and of course, either or both, if it applies. What did you learn from that experience, and how did you come out of that sort of fail, in your favorite fail, so to speak, and how that translated into your future success?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, and we learn a lot from failing. Normally, you learn, like 10 times more from something that didn't go as you expected. So let me share something. I remember the first time that I gamified one entire semester at the university. So I was teaching my third year students of engineering there. The course was, I think that the course was quite interesting, to be honest, because it was a course on virtual reality. But I remember myself teaching one day there, like the very classical way, shouting during 1 hour and a half, talking to everyone. And, I realized that everyone is like sitting, not proactive, looking sick, very tired, not passionate, they were basically sleeping. But I couldn't blame them, to be honest. And I remember this perfectly. I couldn't blame them. And it was like, oh my God, it's so boring. I mean, I'm bored. I understand that they're bored. and it was like, how can it be that I'm talking about virtual reality, which is something so cool, and it's so boring? There's a problem with the methodology. There's a problem with the format. So I started reading on flipped classrooms, so making it more experiential, PBL, problem-based approaches. I looked at the ETC, the Entertainment Technology Center, which was that place that you mentioned at the beginning, that I was there for like one entire year as a faculty doing a postdoc. So that was like my starting point with them. And I looked at some of the courses that one of the founders was teaching there. He was called Randy Pausch. And I figured out, a different way to do it. Like, I'm going to challenge you. It's going to be like a lot of scarce resources, because then your creativity will be better. You're going to do like 3 projects. It's going to be super practical. I'm going to send you, like some information, like very limited. You're going to have to work on groups. Every project is going to be different in the sense that there will be rotation, different profiles, different people, like making things difficult and doing it like for real. And it was quite okay at the beginning, but then after a couple of iterations, I said, okay, let's gamify this thing. So let's start using guilds. Let's put, like some potions, some RPG elements here. Let's add, a couple of scales for points like hit points and experience points. Let's use, like more randomized events and blah, 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 blah. And what happened is a good thing, but, it was close to kill me. and that was like an enormous learning that I like to share, and this is why I chose this example. So what happened is that, okay, I come the very first day of this, let's say, third iteration of my new virtual reality course, which now it's gamified. I'm bringing all this information, which looks like, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, medieval style, with my pictures and with my, initial lecture on the rules of the game, and everything was quite narrative, to be honest, not really techy, quite narrative. I start showing all the tables, the hit points, experience points, talking about missions, we build the groups, and everyone got so engaged, really engaged, that, they were really into it. They started to perform. And the problem is that, I was like the machine behind the entire thing. So there was nothing automatized. I didn't pay enough attention on how to design the assignments. So it was like difficult to correct them, like interesting and good assignments for the students, but a crazy nightmare for me to correct. And then you can imagine that, everyone was like blaming me, like, when are we going to have not the grades, but, the rankings and the badges, and, when are you announcing, like the new experience points or whatever, and blah, 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 blah. And of course, the game wasn't really working because I was like really slow, because I had to correct a lot, integrate a lot of things, because they were engaged and they were, delivering everything, even the let's say elective material, the optional material.
The optional material of the optional material.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember that year because they ended up a little bit sick of me. I couldn't follow the speed that they needed for the game. Of course, they were not students anymore. They were players. So, they were acting. So they were expecting a reaction to come like really, really fast. I couldn't deliver that because, again, it wasn't automatized and all that. And it was like an enormous learning. So it was really interesting because they were motivated, and I learned that it really works. But you need to design something, you need to design this expert system behind that sort of makes it flow fast. Because if not, you kill the game, and then, it's even worse. You can kill like the engagement.
Absolutely. I think there's like many key points from your story. One thing that I would highlight is, and we had a similar story at some point in what I'm going to comment, in the sense that it is very hard in that first time when you realize these things were not automated and all of that. But I think it was a great iteration to do it that way, because imagine you had built a completely, I don't know, an amazing and complex system. You had spent all that time to create the system, and you had the opposite reaction. You had a great system that was completely automated, but nobody was interacting with it. Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely a lot worse.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
There's a lot to be said about those sort of kind of paper prototypes and understanding how that works. And given that you have students every year or every semester, you can go and start doing all those iterations. Of course, at the moment you feel the world is ending, and then you end the semester and you say, well, the world did not end. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. Some of the assignments I gave them are going to be simpler to grade, or they're going to be automated, or you're going to make those decisions, then you're going to try again, and it's going to be fine. I mean, nothing, unless it gets you kicked out of the school.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Very, very rarely the case. It's going to be fine, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that thing that you said about it's really rare that you have problems at the school. I mean, I absolutely agree with that, because if you're in a place where they sort of put enough attention to the way that everyone is teaching and delivering the lessons and everything, then it's going to be fine, because they understand perfectly that you're researching. And in fact, that thing sort of saved me, because then I got some resources. I could convince, some of the people there, to give me, the opportunity to do it again. and to have, like some additional resources. So I got an intern that could help me out during the next year. Besides that, we did a better job with, let's say, all the engineering behind the assignments, and it wasn't perfect, but it was better, so we were like learning. And I got a couple of additional things that I really believe that are important. One is, simplify. You don't need the most complicated game in the world, to engage people inside a class if you're doing gamification for education in this case, because, the normal thing is to have basically 0. So you don't need to go from 0 to 100 in, like 1 week. So it can be less, and it works because at the end of the day, we're human beings, and we get engaged, which is the other learning that I got, that was that it can be a fully analog experience. So you don't really need to do a lot of digitality when designing these things. It can be super analog, and it's fine. I mean, you can be, let's say, in between the most digital people of the world. That was my case with the 30 years of engineering, but at the same time was designing like analog activities, and it was super fun.
That was the other thing I wanted to comment on. I mean, it's not necessarily a super technological solution, and as Oscar is mentioning, it worked phenomenally with improvements. There were things that could be done better because he was able to automate them later. But it is really, really possible. Don't think of zeros and ones, which is what scares many teachers and professors when you think of gamification. There are many things that you could do with pen and paper and just framing things slightly different and giving a theme and doing some of the things that Oscar is going to continue talking about in this interview. And in that same sense, Oscar, we talked about a fail moment. Can you talk us about one of those projects that you say, well, this is a proud project, something I always like to use to show off or to see some of the things, like a big result that you got? Is there a project, and can you run us quickly through how did that project come to life and what were the results?
Yeah, there's this. So I was initially speaking about something that happened at the university some years ago. And right now I'm going to jump to Cookiebox. 3-4 years ago, we got this huge project that we were not aware enough at the beginning of the size. We were supposed to teach train drivers. We were supposed to teach train drivers on safety, security issues besides corporate values, soft skills, and different things. So the fact is that we have this very talented client. They have been building simulators for a long time. They're present in, I don't know, more than 80 countries or something. Every time they sell a simulator is going to be 2-3 million worth. So we are talking about huge, video game style virtual reality stuff where you can basically practice driving anything. And they realized that, okay, they have put a lot of effort on how to train hard skills, but there's nothing to train soft skills. So how am I supposed to make people train, like situations that are more, let's say, endorsed or connected to, what happens when there's more people with me and I have to negotiate working group, if I'm doubting, if I'm not creative enough, if I have this weird situation that I have to face for the first time, it was like super interesting. They saw that they needed some sort of gamified educational, training solution that was completely different from a simulator and that had to go aligned with it. So we start co-creating with the client. It takes us, like 2-3 months, a lot of reunions. And at the end, we sort of start to see the light. And then it took us like 1.5 years to build this thing called Track to Safety. So Track to Safety, which is not, it's not ours, it's not a product, let's say, that is being released by Cookiebox, because we did it for another client who is, the people behind the simulators, and they are commercializing it. But we are so proud of this thing because it was so difficult. It started with nothing, basically one illusion, something that was in the mind of this CEO of this, client company. And after 3 months, we see this gamified universe that can be both, in like a tablet or laptop, where train drivers, which are basically males 45 plus, can play this 60-minute long, like cartoonish movie that has a very interesting plot on trains, of course, and something, connected, let's say, to the hero's journey that happens there. So it's a very interesting story. You have to take some, let's say, alternative decisions there. So it's a little bit like a choose your own adventure, let's say, non-linear storytelling piece. Then you can gain some points depending on the points that you gain, and depending on what the decisions are and everything. You unlock mini games. All these mini games, there's this PvP mechanic where I can combat with another train driver, and everything is so aligned with all the content. I mean, the content was everywhere. The content on safety was inside the movie, the scripting, the mini games. Besides the mini games, we built a complete set of missions that could be accomplished by looking at the material, let's say the educational material that would come with the course. And then we had, this auto-moderated social area where seniors could train juniors on all this stuff. So everything generates points. Yeah, well, maybe a little bit of pain, a little bit, but only a little bit. So the cool thing is, I have the mini games, I have the movie. The movie is chopped in pieces. It's like a Netflix style movie on, cartoonish movie on trains. I can do the missions. I have the social area where I can sort of act as a savvy. I can help the juniors. I can talk about trains, which is what I love, because train drivers, one of the things that we got to know is that they have this job because they really, really, really love trains, and they love to collect everything related with trains. Sometimes they feel frustrated because they don't have people like to share these stories with. So they need people of their discipline, like to mess a little bit with and to talk about that. We also built more than 150 different badges because they are strong collectors. People that love trains, they love to collect. So we did a lot of badges. And if you would look at everything, of course, like the PBL, the rankings, everything, it was like a complete piece with a ton of generated material, very beautiful infographics. The movie, everything. It was like crazy when you would look at the end at this thing. And something happening when we were playtesting. We started the project by co-creating with the client besides doing some market research. So we did some market research on train drivers from different countries to see what the common points were in terms of motivation. And then at the end, we did some playtesting. So I remember that day, 8 train drivers, they come, they're going to spend 8 hours playing with us. They were a little bit reluctant. They were like, what's that thing? And I still remember that man. He was like upset at the beginning because we wanted to record them, for doing like some UX research and analysis. They had to sign these papers where they had to say, okay, you can record me, blah, blah, blah. He was so upset. He was feeling not comfortable. It was like, I don't like to play. You're not recording me. I still remember he saying, if you record me, I know that I will be in YouTube within 1 week, or something like that. And after, so I remember that we said, okay, you don't have to sign the papers, but you're here so you can play. I mean, you can play, let us know, what works, what doesn't work. You're going to have like a list of challenges. It's a task-based protocol. So, you have to try to overcome them, and we would love to listen to your feedback and everything. So he stayed there, he played. And at the end of the day, this man, I remember he was like big, like army style male, big man, that he was like upset and not signing at the beginning of the day. Okay, he ends up crying. He comes to the team and he said something like, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here today. Because it's like the first time that I see, that much empathy on something to what I've been doing for 25, years, which is driving a train. So thank you very much, because now I understand that you've designed something that, again, it's not perfect and it needs some polishing, of course, but it's done for me.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Beautiful example. It was very difficult also.
There you go. That sounds amazing. And again, engagers, I think I've said this not too many times, but you can go back and listen to each and every one of the details that Oscar is talking about in this one. But Oscar, I wanted to make a small shift because you've told us 2 stories of how you design these things. And I know you have a whole master's degree on gamification and transmedia storytelling. But if you had 2, maybe 3 minutes to tell us, what does the process of gamification look like in general for you? how would you describe that, the gamification process?
Okay, I'd say you need to listen a lot. So you need a brilliant briefing from your client. Normally, you're gonna have a client that feels unsure, smells something. They know a lot about their field. They are experts on their field, but there's something that it's not working. Normally, we're talking about behavioral change. So you have this status quo initial situation where there are either patients or students or clients, customers, or collaborators, workers. That there's something that they are not doing, that your client feels that they should do, and at the same time would be good for them, and blah blah blah. So okay, we need some behavioral change. So we start by talking to the client, getting a nice briefing, normally co-creation. So in Cookiebox, everything is co-created. We have our own tools. We use some canvases and some cards. So we sort of force the client to give us like some information. This information, it's a little bit of, what the problem is, general objectives. Let's gonna, land these general objectives into specific ones. Now, can we sort of list the KPIs and indicators? Can we sort of see where to measure? Imagine that the thing is already developed. How would we know that it's working or not in order to change it in real time if needed? Then, which ones are the behaviors that you're expecting, for the people to take? And maybe we can teach something to them. Maybe they need to gain some abilities, and maybe some of the reasons why they are not behavior as you like, are connected to the fact that they need to learn something that they don't know. What else? Tell us about the target group, or the targets groups, that you have. Let's talk about empathy maps. Let's talk about user persona. Let's talk about, motivators, of course. And let's see if we can do some balancing of the narrative, some balancing of the storytelling. So let's work a little bit on the story that these people needs to listen to, because sometimes it's not the perfect story, the one that you're telling them, and maybe they are hating it or something, and then it's not really working. And then the platform a little bit to analyze what the platforms should be. So talking a little bit about the transmedia plan that we say. So it could be comic, it could be movie, board game, card game, it could be social media, it could be an app, it could be virtual reality. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then resources and restrictions. So what with all this information, like resources, restrictions, platform, target, narrative, behaviors that you expect, abilities that they should gain, objectives, blah, blah, blah. We have like all this analysis phase that sort of allows us to synthesize a solution.
That sounds absolutely great. And you actually hit the mark of the 3 minutes. So congratulations on that as well, Oscar.
Thanks. I'm an achiever,
Absolutely, absolutely. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So Oscar, now we're going into this section in which we have all these other different questions. We were into the processes, we went into stories. Now we're going to ask you like sort of straightforward questions. And the first one is, if you could name something that you can name like a best practice or that kind of thing that you say, well, if you're going to use gamification or serious games, what would be one thing that you would say, well, if you think about this, or if you use this strategy, or if you do these kinds of things, your gamification project is almost certainly going to be better?
I'd say a couple of things. The first thing is customize your solution. Customize, because if not, I don't really think that it's going to work. I mean, you need to customize it at least a bit. I know that we don't have all the time of the world and all the resources, and all the money. And sometimes we don't have all the equipment or the information or the team. And sometimes you cannot do something from scratch. Of course, it would be like creating a Ferrari, right? If talking about cars. Okay, we understand that. But you can have like some, let's say, predefined blocks that you more or less know how to connect, and then you can polish a bit. So you have something hybrid. So I think that it has to be customized to the audience that you have, and it has to be customized in all the access. So attend your audience, and then take a look at the narrative vectors, take a look at the psychology for this audience, which means, what motivates these people. Let's take a look at the digital competence that they have or that they don't have, and then we'll decide on the platform, and of course the art, the aesthetics, because it has to be completely different depending on, if I'm 8 or if I'm 38. I'd say these two, like customize. Besides, take a good look at your audience. And if you do that, you might save a lot of money and it might work.
It might even work if you do it actually for the people you're designing it for. That's a great recommendation. Customization, especially thinking about who you're designing for. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, because you know that there's a lot of ego. In video games there's a lot of ego, and sometimes one of these production. I'm saying video games because it's like the typical example. We have many examples of video games that have crashed because they were not designing for the people; they were designing for themselves. So we need to learn a little bit from that.
So talking about games, video games, and that kind of jazz, what would you say is your favorite video game or favorite game in general?
Oof, that one is super difficult, very difficult. Oh my God.
I always enjoy the start, the intro that all the guests give when I make this question, because most of us at least are very, very interested in games in general.
Yeah. It's like a big headache that you love, of course, because it's something beautiful to think about. I would say one different game for every platform that they've been playing with, and it would be difficult, but you have to choose one. Okay, if I have to choose one, I would take one graphical adventure, like this point-and-click adventures that we used to play during the late 80s and especially during the 90s that would come from Sierra or from LucasArts especially. And I had a great time playing one very rare, it wasn't that known. It would come from this French company called Delphine Software, and they had this game called Operation Stealth.
Wow.
Operation Stealth was, let's say, a James Bond point-adventure, point-click adventure game without mentioning James Bond, because I know now that they couldn't get the rights, so they had to use another game, another name, and it was called John Claims.
Wow. Well, I've never heard of that game. I think I'm going to look it up in Steam.
Yeah, beautiful. I had a really, really nice time. And I like it because, it was from a rare company. It wasn't that well known.
You were into indies already. So, Oscar, after hearing most of these questions and feeling all the jazz and all the ideas that we have in Professor Game, who would you say is somebody that you would like to hear answering these questions in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Okay, I like to hear women because we know that normally, there are less in the field. We shouldn't be like that, but it currently is. And if I had to choose one, well, I have like 2 or 3 different women that I would love to.
Please go ahead.
Hear. Yeah, there's like Ruth Contreras.
Mm-hmm.
She's Mexican, but she lives in Barcelona like me, and she's doing a lot of stuff in terms of research and serious games. She has her own, like company, and she does collaborations in universities, and she works for, internationally funded, beautiful research projects. So I think that she could be one. And then I know a couple of game designers that are from here, let's say from Spain, but working abroad. So we have like Laura Llorens. She works as a game designer for Robio, for the Angry Birds 2. And there's also Sandra Lara, which is doing really, really good. Not in Stockholm like Laura, but she's in London, Sandra, and she's doing really, really good, with like commercial advert games and this sort of things in a company called Bagel, I believe, or something. So I think that they 3 could be like super interesting.
In defense of our guests, I must say that we have had quite a few ladies, maybe not as many as we would like, because it's always nice to have a sort of equal, if whenever possible. But in defense of our guests, I think we have had quite a fair share of women as well, and more are always welcome. So those are fantastic recommendations, Oscar. And in that same sense, you were recommending people that would be interesting to listen to. If you had to recommend a book to our listeners, to the engagers, what book would you recommend and why?
Okay. If I had to recommend a book, well, I guess that this book that I'm going to mention has been there, like many times, but I think that is, definitely the start of the system, which is, Jesse Shell's book, The Art of Game Design. This is the one that I would recommend because anyone can read it. It's really, really, it puts all the effort and all the rigor in. It's done by Jesse Shell, who is a researcher, an academic, a practitioner. He talks and he acts, he does the things and he explains the things. And it's so fluent, like easy to digest book that allows you to learn a lot. Sometimes it's not that landed, but I think that there are other books that one might, read after.
Yes.
So I would start with this one. And of course, he has his cards, the cards that come with the book, or you can download them for free in your mobile phone if you wish, which are these AGD cards, Art of Game Design cards, which are like more than 100 advices, in the form of questions, really, really, really brilliant stuff.
The Book of Lenses, absolutely. That's certainly been mentioned, but we can't stress enough the importance of a book like this one for game design and for gamification design as well. So now it's bragging time, Oscar. What would you say is your sweet spot when designing gamification, or your superpower?
My superpower, I don't know. If I had to mention what superpower, it's difficult. More times, like easier to find when you don't do that well, But well, I think that I can be quite good when it comes to strategy. So like holistic view, global view. If I have to imagine the entire project, like looking at it from 10 kilometers distance, and then sort of. I start to see like all this diagram that flows and start to draw by itself. And then you see the connections and the boxes and everything. That sort of initial idea of the diagram that it's going to be like the entire gamified system, that thing, I'm not that bad on it, I would say.
C'est pas mal, como le français.
Eso.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
So, Oscar, we have some sort of integration of gamification into podcasting, which is something that is not very common. And the way that we integrate it is we get questions from our audience. I have to filter some of them because sometimes people, they make a mistake and they write there something that was not a question, or they just make a comment and thank the guests or the program in general. And I filter those questions, and then I pick a random question randomly during the show live, and I give that question to you. And I've been explaining all this because all this time I've spent it finding the question that will be asked. And here it is. Yeah. This question was done by Vasil or Vasil. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, and I apologize in advance. This was a person I even exchanged some emails with in our because I try to answer every email that we get. So the question is, do you have any advice for a UX, so a user experience designer, who wants to transition to gamification?
Yes. I've met a couple of people during the past 3 months that have done this. It depends on where you come from. So I know some people that has gone from game design to UX, or from UX to game design, which is different. But what I would say is, first, there's a lot of similar stuff. The thinking that you have to have, is like so connected that congratulations, because I think that this is something that is going to sum up and very fluently. Secondly, I'd say, okay, if you know UX, do some training on game design. If you know game design, do some training on UX, and of course some reading, because there are like some books out there that sort of connect both things. So if I'm not wrong, there's this book that I'm going to Google while I'm saying it, just to be sure. But I think that
to make sure that we're getting the right one.
Yeah, Swipe This. Yeah, this one, Swipe This, from Scott Rogers. it's like the guide to create touchscreen game design. So yes, it's directed to touchscreens, so to tablets and smartphones and so. But the good thing about this book is that, it's one of the beautiful examples that I've seen that connect both worlds. So UX gets connected to game design, and then, it allows you to understand, like a lot of the transitions there. So yeah, I would recommend this book, like Swipe This, for instance.
So that there would be some of these readings. I completely agree that these are two very related worlds. Is there any quick fire advice for the career transition in itself? Somebody, as you mentioned, you met a few people. What would be like that thing? Like, I've been reading these things. Is there anything I should do? Should I call someone? Should I intern for some gamification company? Should I go to you and try to see what you're doing? What would be like the first thing that you would say they could do if they're in this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I would go to, let's say, the others discipline events. I would start to go to the others discipline events. So if I'm the UX, expert, okay, I'd start to go to gaming events and game design related meetups and all that stuff, to meet people and to start to, to understand, to listen to these, words that they use and to learn more. If I come from the game design side, okay, I would start, getting in touch with UX people. So that would be for me a definitive, advice, like go to the other side, events, and it's going to be complicated at the beginning, but it's exponential. It's going to be easier.
Absolutely. So if you're probably into UX, you're probably going to UX places. Go also to game design. Go to gamification. Go to gamification Europe if you're in Europe. Go to, I don't know, we were last year in Chicago. It was in the US, and gamification and GameCon. There's many things going on all around the world. There's many events in game design. There's many events. There's more and more events coming up in gamification. So definitely go to those places, meet those people, listen to what they say, and do those things. And I've heard before, if you want to do. So if you want to be a gamification designer and you're in the UX, start going to these places, start understanding all these people, and of course, do all the research, because that's very, very important. So thank you very much for this interview, Oscar. It's been a pleasure. It's been very, very interesting. There's been a lot of insights that you've given to our engagers. I can't thank you enough for your time. And of course, before we close this up, I want to go into the plug zone. So let us know where we can find you if we want to know more about that degree in video game design, or that degree in gamification design, or about Cookiebox, or anything else you wanna let us know about. Tell us about now. And if you have also any final piece of advice, it's your time.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you very much, Rob, for bringing me here. It's been like really, really fun. So what I would say. Well, I mean, if you find my LinkedIn, you go to LinkedIn and just say like my account, there's like some information there on the websites and everything. Cookiebox is like easy to locate. We have our website, which is cookiebox.es, and it's in Spanish and in English. There's like an area there with some of the work that we've done and we are sharing, and a blog and everything. If you want to see stuff related to the university, we have this page, which is enti.cat. It's also in Spanish, and there, everyone can see there's 7 different degrees that they talking about, like related to presential video game and serious game studies. And if you're interested in the masters, and it's important to say that it is taught in Spanish, you can go to IEBS. Basically, if you Google something like Gamification Master IEBS, it's going to be there. But please don't hesitate to send me an email, if you're interested in anything, and you'll find it, in the social medias. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Needless to say, you can find all of these links if you go to professorgame.com. You type in Oscar, you're going to find this episode, and you're going to get the links to all of the things that he's been mentioning throughout this episode. So Oscar, thank you very much for being here today, for being with the engagers, giving all of this advice, all of that experience that you bring in. Thank you for all of that. But now it's time to say that it's game over. Hey engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Oscar. Do you have questions that you would like to ask future guests? go to professorgame.com/question and ask your question. If it's selected, it will come up in a future episode and you will get your answer. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how does Chuck implement gamification within Amazon? Then all you have to do is subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.